Welcome to episode 99 of Gods and Heroes of Ancient Greece. My name is MyLinda Butterworth, and today we continue with the tales of Troy and the story of the Funeral of Patroclus. As soon as Achilles reached the ships with the corpse of his foe, he laid the body face downward in the dust beside the bier of Patroclus. The Danai, meanwhile, put off their armor, and by the thousands sat down to the funeral feast. Oxen were slaughtered, and sheep and boars, and the son of Peleus had rich and ample fare prepared for the warriors. Only reluctantly did he allow his friends to take him from the bier of his friend and lead him to the house of Agamemnon. Here a great cauldron of water was set over the fire, and they tried to persuade Achilles to wash the blood and sweat of the battle from his limbs. But he stubbornly refused and swore a mighty oath. "No! By Zeus on Olympus, water shall not touch me before I have laid Patroclus on the pyre, shaved my head, and heaped him a monument. Now the funeral feast shall be held, but tomorrow, Prince Agamemnon, let trees be cut in the forest, and everything brought which is needed, that the fire may swiftly take from us the mournful sight of my friend. After that, the men may again turn to war." The princes let him do as he wished, and sat down to the meal. Then each went to his own house. But the son of Peleus, surrounded by Myrmidons, lay down on the shore of the sea, where the waves had washed it clean. Long on the stony strand he sighed for his friend who was slain. When at last he fell asleep, the soul of Patroclus came to him in a dream. It resembled Patroclus in stature and voice and eyes, and the tunic it wore was from his. The form leaned over him and said, "Are you asleep? Have you already forgotten me, Achilles? You always loved the living, but you are unmindful of the dead. Give me a grave, for I yearn to pass through the gates of Hades. Until now, I have only wandered near them, for phantoms sit there as guards and drive me away. I cannot find rest until my body is burned on the pyre. And my friend, you must know that fate has decreed that you too shall fall near the walls of Troy. Therefore let the grave be so that we, who grew up together in your father's house, may have our bones buried side by side in death." "I shall do as you say," said Achilles, and stretched out his arms to that shadowy form. But it vanished into the earth like mist. Achilles leaped up amazed, struck together his hands, and said mournfully to his companions, "So it is true that souls live on in Hades, for this night I saw before me the soul of Patroclus, sad and making lament, but like him in all things," and his words again wakened the yearning of the heroes for him who was no more. When dawn reddened the sky, Agamemnon bade men and mules go forth, Meriones in the lead. The beasts came first, and after them men with axes and ropes. Then on the wooded slopes of Ida the tallest trees were felled, and the wood split, and loaded on the mules which dragged the trunks down to the shores. And the men too carried logs on their shoulders, and on the shore, and all was laid in rows. Now Achilles bade his Myrmidons gird on their armor of bronze, and yoke the horses to the chariots. Then the funeral procession began to move. First in the chariots came the princes and warriors with their charioteers, and after them followed a vast throng of men on foot. In the midst, his friend and comrades bore Patroclus. His body was covered with locks they had cut from their heads. Following it came Achilles, bowing his head in his hands, and he was sunk in sorrow. When they came to the place Achilles had chosen, they set down the bier, and a whole forest of trees was heaped for the pyre. The son of Peleus stood apart, cut off one of his own golden locks, gazed into the dark tide of the sea, and said, "O Spercheius, river of Thessaly, my country, in vain did my father Peleus vow that if I returned I should shear my hair for you, and offer 50 rams at your springs, where your grove stands and your altar. You were deaf to his pleading, O river god. You will not let me return, and so do not be angry with me if I give this lock to Patroclus to carry him down to Hades. With these words, he put the lock in the hands of his friends and said to Agamemnon, "Tell the people to disperse and eat their meal, O prince. After that, they shall mourn and bury my friend." At Agamemnon's command, the warriors went their ways among the ships, and only the princes remained. From the trunks of the trees which had been felled, they built a great pyre, 100 feet square, and with heavy hearts laid the body on it. Numberless sheep and horned cattle they flayed beside the pyre, heaped the bodies around, and covered the corpse with the fat. Against the bier they leaned jars of honey and oil, and led 4 living horses to the pyre. They also slew 2 of the 9 dogs of Patroclus, and then slew with the sword 12 noble Trojan youths, chosen from among the captives. Thus Achilles took terrible vengeance for the death of his friend. Then he bade them kindle the pyre, and as they obeyed, he called to the dead, "May happiness attend you even in Hades, Patroclus. What I pledged you I have fulfilled. 12 victims have been slain and shall burn on your pyre. Hector alone shall not be consumed in the flames. His flesh shall be food for the dogs." He spoke threateningly, but the gods willed otherwise. Day and night Aphrodite kept the ravaging dogs away from the body of Hector and anointed it with ambrosia, fragrant as roses, until all trace of the dragging had vanished. And Apollo posed a dark cloud over the place where he lay, so that the sun might not shrivel his flesh. And now, though the wood was lit, it would not burn. Then Achilles again turned from the pyre and vowed offerings to the winds, to Zephyr and Boreas, poured wine for them from a cup of gold, and begged them to quicken the sparks to a blaze. Iris brought his message to the winds, and with awful clamor they stormed across the sea and flung themselves into the pyre. All night they roared through the wood and lashed the flame, while Achilles never ceased pouring libations for the souls of his dead friend. When the sky grew saffron with dawn, the winds rested, the fire died down, and the embers crumbled to ash. In the midst of the charred wood and cinders lay the bones of Patroclus, and at the uttermost edge of the bones of animals and men intermingled. At the command of the son of Peleus, the heroes quenched the heat of the ashes with red wine, and many tears they gathered up the white bones of their comrade, covered them with 2-fold layer of fat, and placed them in a golden urn which they carried to the house of Achilles. Then they measured the place, set a foundation of stones where the pyre had been, and heaped earth for the burial mound. When all was done, the funeral games began. Achilles had the Argives assemble and sit in a wide circle. Then he brought as prizes tripods, cauldrons, mules, strong oxen, and arrays in costly robes, women who were trained in crafts and precious gray iron. First came the chariot races. In these he himself did not partake, for he had lost his beloved charioteer. But up rose Eumelus, son of Adamas, a hero most skilled in the art of driving. Then came Diomedes, who yoked the splendid horses he had taken from Aeneas. Third was Menelaus, with his horse the Dagaras, and Agamemnon's mare, Athe. The fourth to enter the race was Antilochus, Nestor's young son, to whom his father gave advice concerning the race. Fifth, Meriones yoked his glossy flanked steeds. Then the 5 heroes mounted their chariots, and Achilles shook the lots to decide in what order they were to stand. First the lot of Antilochus leaped from the helmet, then that of Eumelus, Menelaus, Meriones, and last the son of Tydeus. As umpire, Achilles chose gray-haired Phoenix, his father's comrade in arms. All 5 together raised their goads, called to their horses, struck their backs with the reins, and stormed across the plain. The dust whirled high under the horses' hoofs, their manes fluttered, and the chariots now rolled on the ground, now leaped through the air. Taut and upright stood the drivers, and their hearts beat high with longing for victory. As the horses approached the end of the course, which was near the sea, each seemed fleetness itself as it strained toward the goal. The mares of Eumelus flew in the van, but hot on their flanks, drew the breath of Diomedes' steeds, when suddenly Apollo snatched the goad from the hands of the son of Tydeus, and the speed of his creature lessened. Athene observed the trick, returned the goad to the hero, and broke the yoke of Eumelus, so that the mares sprang apart, and the driver plunged headlong from the chariot and doubled up in pain beside the wheel. Past him sped the son of Tydeus, after him Menelaus. Next, after him came Antilochus, urging on his horses with panting cries. And then, when the rains had washed away the soil, Menelaus stopped his horses. But Antilochus boldly drove past him. As the Argives watched, trying to distinguish the horses and the cars through the moving clouds of dust, Diomedes left the others behind. His chariot, overlaid with shining tin and gold, had arrived at the goal. From the necks and breasts of his horses, sweat poured in streams, and the son of Tydeus sprang to the ground and leaned his goad against the yoke. His friend, Sthenelus, took the prizes, a fair woman and a tripod, and gave them to his comrade to carry away. Then he loosed the horses from the yoke. After him came Antilochus, and almost at the same moment, Menelaus. Somewhat slower a spear's throw behind, Meriones reached the goal, and at last of all injured Eumelus with his damaged chariot. But though he came last, Achilles wished to give him the second prize because he was the most skilled in driving, and his misfortune was due in no fault of his own. But Antilochus disputed this heatedly. "The second prize is mine," he said. "That beautiful mare is my prize. If you are sorry for Eumelus, surely you have enough gold and bronze, horses and women in your house to give him something." Achilles smiled, awarded the mare to his younger friend, and gave Eumelus the magnificent breastplate he had seized from Asteropaeus. But now Menelaus accused Antilochus of having gotten in the way of his horses, and he bade him swear by Poseidon it was untrue. Antilochus did not dare swear a false oath. He admitted his ruse and led the mare he had won over to the son of Atreus. But Menelaus was satisfied to let the youth have his mare, and accepted the third prize, a cauldron. The fourth prize, 2 talents of gold, fell to the share of Meriones, and the fifth, a 2-handled bowl, though it was unclaimed, Achilles gave to Nestor as a memorial of the funeral of Patroclus. Next came the boxing match. The prize for the victor was a mule, that for the vanquished a 2-handed cup. When this was proclaimed, a tall and mighty man arose, Epeius, son of Panopeus. He put his hand on the mule and cried, "This is mine. Let him who will have the cup. But I give him fair warning, my fist will shatter his body, and his bones will be crushed." Silence met the grim announcement, but Euryalus, son of Mecisteus, girded himself and faced his opponent, ready for the fight. Then they raised their arms, fists landed on jaws, and sweat flowed from straining limbs. Finally, Epeius struck his adversary on the cheek, and he fell to the ground like a fish which a wave has flung on the sandy shore. Epeius helped him up by the hands, and as his friends led him away, he spat blood, and his head drooped. Next, Achilles announced the prizes for the wrestling match. For the victor, a great tripod equal in worth to 12 oxen. For the vanquished, a woman lovely to look at and skilled in handiwork. Then Odysseus and Ajax the Great clasped each other with supple arms, and they were as closely interlocked as timbers joined by a builder. The sweat poured from them, their bodies creaked, and their sides and shoulders were marked with bloody wales. The Argives were beginning to mutter with impatience when Ajax lifted Odysseus from the ground, but he crooked his knee and thrust at his opponent, threw him back on the ground, and fell on his chest. But he could move him only very little, and the two rolled in the dust. "You have won," cried Achilles. "I shall give you prizes of equal value." For the foot race to follow, a mixing bowl of silver delicately wrought, and so large that it held 6 measures, was destined for the victor. The second to reach the goal was to have an ox, the third half a talent of gold. Ajax, the swift Locrian, Odysseus, and Antilochus offered to run. Achilles gave the sign, and Ajax stormed ahead. But close to him as the weaving rod to the breast of a woman came Odysseus. Ajax felt his breath fanning his neck, and all the Danai called encouragement to the fleet runner. When they were almost at the goal, Odysseus prayed to Athene with all the fervor of his heart, and she made his limbs light and let Ajax stumble over the filth left over from the sheep and cattle which had been slaughtered for Patroclus, and he fell and soiled his face. The Argives roared with laughter when the moment later Odysseus seized the mixing bowl, and Ajax, gagging and spitting, laid his hand on the ox. Smiling, Antilochus took the third prize and said, "The gods give honor to the older men. Ajax is indeed only slightly older than I, years, but he is of an older line." "It is to your profit that you have spoken words so free from envy," said Achilles, and added a half a talent of gold to the prize of the handsome youth. And now the son of Peleus brought into the circle the beautiful lance of Sarpedon, which Patroclus had carried off as spoils, and laid it down together with the shield and the helmet. For these 2 of the bravest heroes were to fight fully armed, and receive the prize jointly. Achilles was to feast both in his house, and the victor was to have a sword studded with silver, the Thracian sword Astyopaeus. 3 times with flashing eyes, Ajax, son of Telamon, and Diomedes ran at each other with their arms. Ajax pierced the shield of the son of Tydeus, and Diomedes aimed at his throat. In grave concern for Ajax, the Argives separated the 2, but it was the son of Tydeus who received the sword. Next came the contest with the iron discus, which Aetion, king of Thebes, whom Achilles slew, had often thrown. Epeius swung it and threw, but with so little skill that the Danai burst out laughing. Then Leontius threw, and next mighty Ajax, and it flew beyond the mark. But Polypete hurled it farther than all the others, as a herdsman flings his crook over his grazing kine, and he bore off the prize. 10 double axes and 10 hatchets of bluish iron Achilles set as prize for the archers. A pigeon was bound to the mast of a ship with a thin cord. Whoever hit the bird was to have the double axes, and whoever missed the bird but hit the cord was to have the smaller hatchets. Teucer and Meriones cast lots for the first shot. Teucer's lot leaped from the helmet, but because Apollo did not favor him, he missed the bird and cut the cord and his shaft so that the pigeons soared into the air. As Teucer watched it, vexed and disappointed, Meriones snatched the bow from his hand, fitted his arrow to the string, and shot the pigeon through the wing in flight. And this he achieved because he had quickly vowed a hecatomb as thanks offering to Phoebus. The wounded dove perched on the mast, its neck and wings drooped, and a moment later it fell down dead. The Achaeans shouted with joy and amazement. Meriones took the axes, and Teucer carried off the hatchets. Lastly, a spear and a cauldron carved with tendrils and flowers were brought into the ring as prizes for casting the javelin. First, Agamemnon, ruler of many people, arose, and after him Meriones. But Achilles said, "Son of Atreus, from watching you in battle, we all know how far you excel above the others in casting the lance, so leave the spear to Meriones, and take the cauldron without competing for it." Agamemnon consented. He handed the lance to the Cretan and took the cauldron. And this was the end of the games. And here is where I end my tale for today. But I'll be back with more tales, many more tales. Until then, my friends, enjoy the journey.